Today we're going to be discussing the American Pale Ale style. It's a much more recent style than our previous beer, obviously. Weiss beer was around in some form or another long before America even existed, whereas American Pale Ale, or APA, came about around the late 70s, maybe early 80s. APAs are a take on the English-style Pale Ale, but as I mentioned last time, if it's an American style, that means more hops, more alcohol. Bigger, better, faster, dumber. That's how we do shit here. Now, I love APAs. They are the perfect beer for almost any occasion, and there's so many to choose from. Almost every craft brewery makes some kind of APA. Some are classics, like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale and Deschutes Mirror Pond. Some are new and flashy with experimental hops that don't even have names yet. Whichever you prefer, you know that there's never a bad time for an APA. Are you just visiting St. Louis? Drink Citywide from Four Hands. Do you think you're the shit? Drink Three Floyd's Alpha King so everybody knows how you feel. Are you playing old school video games all day? Build a time machine and drink some 8-bit from Tallgrass. Are you indecisive? Fucking just drink Sierra Nevada Pale Ale then. Seriously, it's so good. Is that enough examples? I think so. My point is, this is the style of beer I judge all others by. I've never been a lager guy. I know a lot of people, when they think of beer, they think of lagers. They think of Bud Light or PBR or Stag. But for me, APA is the beer benchmark. And most styles, for one reason or another, fall short. Let's go to the guideline. Oh, first I'll reiterate I'm using the BJCP guidelines for info about beer styles. That's the Beer Judge Certification Program, and they're an organization that has worked for years to develop standardized methods and processes for evaluating and ranking beer. They do meat and cider too. And they do that by promoting a common language for tasting and evaluating beer. They're very cool people if you're into structure. A lot of craft brewers like to flout conventions, but you have to know what those conventions are before you can defy them, you know. Last time I read the overall impression section aloud, so I figured I'd do that again here. So, from the experts, a pale, refreshing, and hoppy ale, yet with sufficient supporting malt to make the beer balanced and drinkable. The clean hop presence can reflect classic or modern American or New World hop varieties with a wide range of characteristics. An average strength, hop-forward pale American craft beer, generally balanced to be more accessible than modern American IPAs. That's all you need, right? Pale and refreshing. Hoppy but balanced. Average ABV, very accessible. It's a beer style for the masses. It may not be the sexiest style, you know, but it's solid. It's as solid as beer styles get. And the main flavor component in an APA is the hoppiness. Nowadays there are a plethora of hop varieties to choose from, but back when APAs were getting started, there were only a few that had distinctly American flavor. The first was Cascade, which was developed in Oregon and first used commercially in 1975 in the Anchor Brewing Liberty Ale, the precursor to both APAs and American IPAs. It is a floral citrusy hop that is very versatile. It can be used for flavor, aroma, dry hopping, even as a bittering hop in an APA, despite its relatively pedestrian alpha acid levels. Some of that might not mean anything to you, but we'll get into all that in greater detail shortly. The other classic American hops include Centennial, Chinook, and Columbus. Centennial was developed to be a kind of super Cascade, so its profile is very similar, but with more alpha acids. Chinook has high alpha acid levels too, and a piney, grapefruity character. It is most often used for bittering, and Columbus is very dank and pungent, also with high alphas, also used for bittering. Later on, we got some American hops that didn't start with the letter C, like Amarillo and Ottenham, but these are the big guys. Now, when talking about hops, there are a lot of descriptors that get thrown around, like I just described Columbus as dank. That doesn't mean the beer smells like your grandma's basement. When you're talking about hops, dank just means they smell like weed. So, I don't know your life, maybe it does smell like your grandma's basement. Maybe your grandma moved some serious weight. Either way, that pungent, green, resinous smell that marijuana has can also be found in a lot of hop varieties. Which makes sense because hops and weed are essentially plant cousins. They both belong to the family of plants called Cannabaceae. So there are bound to be similarities between the two. It helps to have an idea what a flavor descriptor means as it relates to beer. The best way to know truly is to taste it. Experience is the greatest teacher, and if you want to know what I mean when I say a beer tastes minty or piney, you really just need to drink lots of beer. Rough homework, I know. But that common language is key to communicating our shared experience. That way when I get really up my own ass and talk about a beer that's got a hop profile like freshly cut grass, with an undercurrent of autumnal maltiness and a touch of horse blanket, but the zippy effervescence helps to balance the otherwise velvety mouthfeel and warmth from the alcohol, you won't immediately write me off as a pompous windbag. You will be able to wade through all that verbal diarrhea and extract meaning from it. So yeah, there are lots of descriptors for hops. American hops, or New World hops in general, can be characterized as citrusy, floral, piney, tropical fruit, resinous, stone fruit, melon. None of these are necessarily required in an APA, but there needs to be some apparent hoppiness. You will get some nice bready malt balance and maybe a touch of fruity esters, but the hops are the star of this show. These days, most APAs are dry hopped to give the beer a fresh green hoppiness. Dry hopping is when you add hops after primary fermentation is complete. This gives you more hop flavor and aroma, but it doesn't add any further bitterness. It's also important to note that most beer, especially ones that lean towards the hoppy side, they're meant to be consumed fresh. You want your hops to be bright and punchy, and the fresher the beer, the brighter the hops. It seems counterintuitive when you consider that people started over-hopping beers back in the day so they would last longer, but their concern was spoilage, not flavor. Beer's made to be enjoyed promptly. If you wait too long, your beer will taste like wet cardboard. That's why it's important to always check your dates before you buy. And sure, lots of beers can be aged. If it's got a lot of alcohol or it's barrel aged, it will evolve over time and probably get better with a year or two under its belt. But when you're talking about APAs or other hoppy beers, they are best when they're fresh. Fresh being, within 30 to 60 days of their born on date, ideally. After that, you'll start to notice some changes. That doesn't mean you need to throw it out if it's past 60 days. It's not going to kill you. It just won't taste as good. Most old beer is perfectly drinkable. Just drink a fresh beer with a lot of IBUs, and after that your taste buds will be beaten into submission and your old beer will drink just fine. Anyway, this concludes our beer drinkers public service announcement. Back to APAs. APAs range in color from pale gold to light amber. They have an off-white head with decent retention, and they're usually clear. Sometimes that dry hopping will give the beer a slight haze, and these days, with the hazy beer craze in full swing, some of them look more like orange juice than beer, but like I said, that is atypical. As far as mouthfeel goes, APAs are medium-bodied, with moderate to high carbonation and a smooth finish. These beers are meant to go down nice and easy, just like your wheat dealing grandma. Nailed it. So you don't want them to be overly aggressive. You want balance, harmony. They're very zen beers, these American Pale Ales. Things were trending away from them a few years ago because people thought they were boring. That's when the craft beer boom was really gathering steam and everybody wanted big beers like 15% barrel-aged stouts and triple IPAs with face-melting levels of IBUs. Then for a minute we all dabbled in the session IPA, which you would think would just be an APA, but they were different somehow. Better? They had a good marketing strategy, I guess. Anyway, the difference between a session IPA and an APA is like splitting hairs, but some people will tell you they prefer one over the other. Nowadays, session IPAs are on their way out, seemingly, and APAs are back in the spotlight. The lesson here being that beer nerds are a capricious bunch. As far as the history of the style goes, it is a fairly new style. The term pale ale originated in England in the early 1800s, when advances in malting technology led for beers that were not just brown or black. These paler alternatives came to surpass porters in popularity with the help of brewers at Burton-on-Trent, who used their hard alkaline water to produce a bitterly hot beer that was still dry and smooth. These British pale ales were often referred to as bitters. The terms were fairly interchangeable. For whatever reason, the Brits still called theirs bitters, while we call ours pale ales. The ingredients used in the UK provide another key difference in the finished product. Their malts are more robust and nutty, and their hops are earthy and floral. In the US, our pale ale malts are soft and crisp, and our hops are citrusy and more in your face. Their yeast is more fruity too, whereas US brewers tend to use yeast that's more neutral. In 1981, Sierra Nevada released their pale ale. American consumers at the time were accustomed to macro lagers, and the SMPA was not so much of a departure that it scared those beer drinkers off. In fact, it inspired a revolution. Like I said before, few craft breweries today don't have an APA in their lineup. And that pretty much brings us up to speed. It's a beer style that's the same age as I am, roughly, so it's not going to take much to cover the history. There are some characteristic ingredients that go into an APA. They use pale ale malt, generally North American 2-row. So there's 2-row and 6-row barley. 2-row has 2 kernels together, and 6-row has 11. No, don't be stupid. It has 6. Almost like a Star of David. 2-row is used in pretty much all European styles, and American styles that don't use a lot of adjunct grains like wheat, rye, oatmeal, what have you, tend to favor 2-row as well. There are reasons for this, but I'm not the guy to talk about them. Maybe I'll tackle that in a future episode. APAs also use American or New World hops, of course. I think we covered that sufficiently already. They use American or English ale yeast, depending on whether they want a fruity yeast character or something more clean. The yeast doesn't make up a huge percentage of the overall flavor profile of an APA. It's very different from a Weiss beer in that regard. APA is lighter and cleaner than its English counterparts. It shares a lot of characteristics with an American amber ale. The main difference there is that American amber is more malty, more caramely, with a bit less hoppiness. APAs are also similar to American IPAs, but with less hoppy bitterness and a lower alcohol content. And as far as session IPAs go, APAs are supposed to be more balanced, but the line is very blurry there. As far as vital statistics go, APA has an IBU range from 30 to 50, so pretty middle of the road. It's bitter, but not crazy. SRM ranges from 5 to 10, which would be pale gold to light amber. I think I already said that, but whatever, I said it again. Pale gold to light amber. And its ABV ranges from 4.5% to 6.2%, so again, very average range. Everything about APA straddles the median. It should be a boring, basic style. But there's this weird magic in fermentation that takes all these mundane statistics and basic-ass ingredients and transforms them into something special. I think I've talked up this year in about a pale ale enough, but there are so many other great examples of the style. Some of the high notes include Daisy Cutter from Chicago's Half Acre, which is grassy and piney and tropical. Another newish one is Pseudo Sue from Toppling Goliath, which is the be-all, end-all APA for a lot of beer nerds out there. Mirror Pond from Deschutes is an older example. First brewed in 1988, this beer's been kicking around for a long time now. And everyone should try Three Flight Zombie Dust at least once, if only to say you've had it. It may not be the best APA you'll ever have, but it is probably the beer that inspired the best APA you'll ever have. Okay, let's take a break. We'll come back and do some homebrew tips. Hang in there, we'll be right back.